But I found just from personal experience and then conversations that we've had with different leaders over time, and even in our own ideation sessions, it's so much more fulfilling when you say, yeah, people have done something similar, but they've never done it like this. And I'm willing to put my time, energy, and effort behind the this that I'm bringing to the table that's uniquely different from everybody else. And that's a skill, I think, if you want your leadership to last over time, you have to be willing in maybe teaspoonfuls or truckloads to take some of that risk that comes along with ideation and putting something out in the space that hasn't been there before. If you want your leadership to last a long time, there needs to be a willingness to do that.
Hi, I'm Chris LeBrun, your host of the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. As someone who's never been afraid of dreaming big and going for it all, I often find myself with a lot on my plate. I'm a husband and father, a nonprofit fundraiser, and an entrepreneur. What I've realized is my view of productivity was pretty toxic. After decades of believing that in order to do more, you had to work harder, I began to see productivity as this beautiful thing. Holistic productivity is the idea that you can accomplish your professional, personal, and purpose-driven goals in a healthy way, and doing so will make you happier and more fulfilled. Join me each week as we break down myths about productivity, share practical tips for maximizing your time, energy, and focus, and hear from others about their productivity journey. This is the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. All right, welcome to this episode of the Wholistic Productivity Podcast. I am Chris LeBrun, your host and productivity coach. I am excited about today. This has been something that I have been waiting for. I have been looking forward to. In my mind, this is where this podcast was always going to go, and that is bringing in other voices, other guests to talk about their experience, not just with productivity, but with life in general, and talk about what they are doing and how they are doing it in the world. And I am so excited for our guest this morning. This was always the person I wanted to have on as the first guest. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce him now. Pierre Quinn is our guest. Pierre is a leadership strategist, executive coach, and keynote speaker. He helps purpose-driven professionals, I love that, navigate complexity with clarity and courage. He is the founder of the Cardell Group and leads high-impact leadership experiences for corporate teams. Now, here's what makes Pierre so good at what he does. He brings this rare blend of emotional intelligence, strategic insight, and storytelling. Storytelling is key in everything that he does. He is the author of 2 books, Leading While Green and Leading While Scared, and he was named as one of Global Guru's top 30 leadership professionals for 3 straight years now. He is known for creating space for leaders to reflect, reset, and rise. And Pierre equips leaders to move forward with confidence and purpose. Pierre, welcome to the show.
Man, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me. It's kind of funny, hearing you read my bio when you used to be my boss, but
See, I knew that was coming up at some point. I knew it was coming. I didn't know it was going to be the first thing out of your mouth. We'll talk about that. We'll get there. No, seriously, when I started thinking about the podcast, and we've talked about the podcast before, I always knew that you were going to be the first guest. I'll be honest, I had 2 names that came to the top of my head as soon as I knew I was doing the podcast. I said, I got to get them on the show. 1, Pierre Quinn. 2, Richard Branson. So I'm putting that out there right now. I'm 50% of the way there. I just need to get Sir Richard to say yes. I guess he needs to know who I am first. But
that's rarefied air, man.
Look,
we're same sentence, man. That's
Mr. Cool. Top 30 Guru. Yes, you are in rarefied air, whether you like it or not. This is just a true honor to talk to you. You have been a part of this journey since the beginning. And so that's why it made sense for you to be the first person. I don't know if you knew this. When we had this conversation, you were the first person I ever talked to about this idea of the planner, what has turned into the Holistic Productivity Planner, this
Mhm.
whole philosophy of holistic productivity. That was the first conversation I'd ever had outside of my head. Were you aware of that? Did you know that?
I was not aware. I was not aware. That's a
So
big deal. That's cool.
yeah, I mean, and I'm one of these people that is normally guarded
Hmm.
with my ideas. I'm learning in that area to grow and be better. But it was a big deal to actually talk to somebody about it. And you were like, "Hey, let's go, let's do it." I mean, yeah, that was huge. Had you ever thought much about productivity before that?
I think in theory, yeah. And I mean, you know how we all have these things that we do and we don't necessarily know why we do them, or we don't have a documented approach or framework behind it. So I knew personally there were some things that I was doing to be productive, but in terms of like a system conversation, like how do
Mhm.
we move theory to application, and then how do we set up something for other people to be able to take with and run with it? I hadn't thought about it that deeply until we first started having those conversations, and then I started looking around. It's like, man, there's a heck of a lot of planners in my house. There's a whole bunch of calendars and whiteboard markers. So I think I
Yeah.
can hop on this train and vibe where Chris is going. So yeah, you unlocked a few things for me on the way too. So yeah, man.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, yeah, we were Pierre and a couple of other guys came on board from the very beginning, and were there with me. That was huge. That was huge in terms of giving me the confidence to be able to have those conversations with other people, and we would not be here today without that initial conversation, without you guys believing in what I was dreaming up in my head
Yeah,
and talking through that, helping me in those early stages to bring out some of those ideas. And that's why you had to be the first, man. That's why you had to be here first. So thank you for being here.
man. You setting the bar real high. So let me see if I can do some chin ups here
Hey,
with you.
does that happen to you often though? Do people come and pitch you ideas like that?
No, have you ever taken like a strengths finder? Not like a strengths finder. Have you ever taken strengths finder?
I
The
think
top five core strengths.
I think it's been a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Clifton Strengths Finder. It's been around for a number of years. I took it a number of years ago. I think even around the time where we were working together, I think that was when I first took it. And I always thought my core strength was something related to communication or something related to leadership. I take this thing, Chris, and my core strength is ideation. Like this is the top. And I've taken it maybe 3 or 4 times over the past 10 years or so. And it keeps coming back. Ideation, ideation, ideation. So not only do I always have another idea, I was about to say, not only do I have another good idea, but not only do I have another idea, I'm able to curate the space where people are comfortable talking through and working out their ideas with me in real time. So it happens fairly often where someone will say, here's what I'm thinking, or here's what I'm working on, or this is the first time I'm actually saying this out loud.
Hmm.
And I believe, or I trust that it'll be safe for me to talk about this idea with you. So it happens more often than not.
And that's amazing that you have that ability to give people the comfort and the trust to come to you, that you are that safe space. That's a huge thing. Why is ideation? We were going to talk about this later, but you
Mhm.
went there, so I'm going to jump there now.
Yeah.
Why is ideation such an important tool for leaders to be able to utilize?
It's really easy to get caught up in whatever's off the shelf or whatever people have done before. And I think one of the reasons why we lean into that as leaders is because it's, in a lot of ways, it's safe.
Hmm.
You're doing something someone else has done before, something someone else has tried. Chris, there's a fair amount of risk in coming up with something novel, or even if the tool itself, right? The thing that you're looking to leverage, maybe that isn't new, but the
Hmm.
story around it that you're framing your approach to it is completely different. And as humans, man, we just don't want to be embarrassed. We don't want to be let down, or we don't want to feel like we're a disappointment. So sometimes it's an easier pull to do something in the exact way someone else has done it before. But I found, just from personal experience and then conversations that we've had with different leaders over time, and even in our own ideation sessions, it's so much more fulfilling when you say, yeah, people have done something similar, but they've never done it like this. And I'm willing to put my time, energy, and effort behind the this that I'm bringing to the table that's uniquely different from everybody else. And that's a skill, I think, if you want your leadership to last over time, is you have to be willing, in maybe teaspoonfuls or truckloads, to take some of that risk that comes along with ideation and putting something out in the space that hasn't been there before. If you want your leadership to last a long time, there needs to be a willingness to do that.
Do leaders allow enough time for ideation?
Simple answer, no.
Hmm.
I think when we look at stakeholders, when we look at KPIs, when we look at those meetings that happen at the end of every week or month or quarter, those results driven conversations, depending on how our organizations are structured, there is a tendency to sometimes see things as nice to have. Oh, that's nice. And even how we frame ideation and coming up with a new idea, either that's nice to have, or it's something that's maybe attributed to a division of the company. That's what the creatives do. That's what the marketing team does. Or they come up with a new idea. What's interesting, this last push, I don't know, maybe 10 years or so, this push globally around innovation.
Hmm.
How do we take what we're doing, and how do we do it better? So it's not necessarily creating from scratch. It's building upon or pivoting what's already there as the framing around innovation. And that requires a fair bit of ideation. And if you have not exercised that muscle, if you have not been in a space where you've integrated it into your work processes, then it makes it difficult. And even when ideas start to be generated, we push back on them sometimes in favor of things that we've already done. So the more we allow the space for it, and now we're seeing a big thing that's happening in companies, this idea of entrepreneurship, where we don't want you to take your good ideas and your thinking and your way of seeing the world. We don't want you to leave our company and go and create your own. We're going to curate the space for you to be able to leverage some of those processes internal as a benefit to our company. So we're going to create the space for ideation to happen. There's always a value add when we really lean into it, but we don't take the necessary time and allocate the space for it the way we should.
Well, what you just said there, that takes the right type of leader that's confident and mature to be able to allow that to happen within the company structure. And so that's a special kind of leader there. But I mean, I think in general, it is easy to get caught in that trap of doing the same thing that we've always done. But guess what? We're getting the same results. And if we don't allow that space for ideation or entrepreneurship, we're going to be stuck where we are. That's I mean, how else do you grow if you're not ideating and changing?
No, I was reading an article. I'm a LinkedIn like news junkie, and I don't know the algorithm behind the LinkedIn news. I don't know the particular leanings of it that comes up in the news feed, so I can't analyze it from that perspective. But I'm more or less a LinkedIn news junkie, and I saw a a title in the news feed around Chipotle. Chipotle sales are down. They're trying to figure out, how do we do this thing, and they said catering only accounts for, I think, less than 2% of the revenue that Chipotle brings in the door. Because we don't really think about Chipotle as a catering service. And the article is talking about how now they're spending time and energy and money around how do we make our catering option a viable income stream. And I would love to be in the room for that conversation, Because if we take this example of Chipotle doing what it's always done, then catering is going to be less than 2% of its revenue.
Right.
But now how do we build ad campaigns around birthday parties and graduation celebrations with the Chipotle warming stations there and the delivery car driving up to the outside celebration? What are the ideas that we're going to throw on the wall and kind of see what sticks and what we can build around? Because if we do what we've always done, we're going to get the result we've always been getting. So I'll be tracking how Chipotle ideates around building on this catering idea and turning it into a sizable income stream.
Yeah. No, that's that. And again, it's not just the individuals, it's the corporate catering. I mean, we've ordered Chipotle before for catering. I mean, it just bring it in and it's everybody likes it. It's, they can customize it. It's one of those things that is the perfect catering wherever it is, corporate, personal, because everybody gets to customize their meal.
Yeah. Yeah. And even in that, right, from an ideation standpoint, your version of a good taco and my version of a good taco, we probably have, I mean, you're like from one of those places in the world, at like Boston area, right?
Come on.
Right. I'm from the Midwest. So our version of what makes a good taco, we probably have two different versions of what the idea is. And the cool thing about it is that in the space, there's space for both of our ideas when you have like a burrito or taco station. And how do we broaden that to organizational culture and context? Like at the end of the day, we're making a taco. At the end of the day, we're making a burrito. But how we get there, where can we allow some of the flexibility and creativity to take place so that everyone derives some value out of the general direction that we're looking to go?
Yeah. Let's go back to the beginning. You talked about us using to work together. That was an interesting time from a leadership perspective. You started out in that fundraising space as well. You went on to do adjunct teaching as a professor. Later, your career was as a pastor, pastoral leadership, and now a leadership speaker. What is that? What was that journey like? And was that always the plan to take that course, or were you just sort of following? What was that like?
I didn't have really any higher education aspirations per se. Like I'm a boarding school kid, like you. I'm a boarding school kid. And I finished boarding school. Eventually I wanted to go to school, I guess, but it wasn't high on my priority list. It was just, I was kind of in that stage of life as an 18-year-old, like whatever.
Yeah.
So I end up at a school, at a private school. Then I'm just going through the motions, eventually get my life on track. I think I graduate in five years in a semester as opposed to 4 years. My GPA is not solid enough to get into any of the graduate schools I want to get into. So I just stay at my alma mater, go to graduate school, and I start teaching. And it's a pretty cool experience. Then, you find the classic story, you find a girl, you want to get married, and you realize I don't have a job that can sustain my life. So what am I going to do? And around this time, I'm having these conversations, grad school, I'm teaching. There's this opportunity. Hey, we've seen you be a really good ambassador for the school. You have a track record of student participation. We want you to consider working in annual giving. And I'm like, first of all, I have no idea what you're talking about. I know nothing about this. Yeah, I was a phone-a-thon caller. What? But fundraising, development, just really new. And they said, no, it'll be great. You can leverage your communication and your storytelling and your speaking is a great way to pull all of those things together. And I said, well, okay, it's a full-time job.
Yeah.
That's we could figure out the rest. That
box.
Right. We can figure out the rest from here. Let's go for it. And then getting into the space, and as you said, a couple weeks, seems like a couple weeks later, or it was a very short
Yeah,
period of time
short.
between when I started and my boss leaving. And now I'm like, what's happening? Oh, Chris just joined not too long ago. He's a real cool dude. We've had some conversations, just cordial
Mhm.
conversations. Okay, now Chris is my boss. What what are
Yeah.
what are we doing here? And I remember early on, I don't know if it was before you got there or shortly after, there was a consultant that came in from CASE, Council for the
Mhm.
Advancement and Support of Education. And he came in, he was really like an annual giving coach, like people who were first time in fundraising and development. He came along and just showed them the lay of the land. And I was really interested in what he was teaching me, but I was more interested in what he was doing. I was thinking,
Mm.
how do you get that job? Because that job seems really, really cool.
Right.
I want to travel in different places and show people basics or fundamentals and coach them up. So this just kind of sat in the back of my head. I think I did the gig at Andrews University, my alma mater, for I don't know, a year and a half, maybe two.
Yeah.
And then I got a job at an NGO doing the same thing. And it was like, there's a couple factors that went into the job that I don't think I've ever talked about
Mm.
publicly. It was such a huge transition from our small team at Andrews, where really like everyone's door was open. And if you
Mhm.
had an issue or a challenge, or I'm working on a campaign, hey Chris, I just wrote something, can you pop in, or can we go to lunch? And we saw each other a lot, we traveled, we did, it was
Yeah.
really good first full-time job experience for me. And then going into a world where it was just cubicles and you never saw anyone.
Yeah.
One, that drove me crazy. It drove me I was just nuts. Like I can't talk to anyone about anything that I'm working on, and then people are bothered if you come and talk to them.
Right.
Okay, maybe this is not the space. But I was willing to stick it out because it was a higher income. It was a higher income. I was living in Maryland. It was great. But then ultimately I said, no, there's some other pieces about my life I need to investigate and pick up. That's when I end up going back to Andrews. I go back to seminary.
Mm.
Well, I go back to graduate school. I study theological studies in the seminary. I get my old job back teaching. I do that for a few years. Ultimately, I leave Andrews to pastor a church. And that was the time where, because I also come from an entrepreneurial background,
Mm.
that was the time where life was just seemingly converging on itself. And as
Mm.
much as I had this really strong desire to pastor churches and lead people on their faith journey, which was really important to me, I also had this strong desire to build something that was my own.
Mm.
And I wrestled, those two ideas were in conflict for a very, very long time.
Mm.
And I worked to move them to being in concert with each other. So a few years ago, if we fast forward in the narrative, a couple of churches later, a handful of churches later, handful of experiences later, two books later, I ultimately decide, okay, I'm going to start my own company and bring all of these worlds together, from teaching, from development, from pastoring, from coaching. What does it look like to live in synergy with all of these things? And that's really how we got to where we are today. And not planned, unscripted. I am
Yeah.
not a scripted person, like charted out life plan
Hmm.
up until that point. And it was only on the other side that I realized, wait, in order for me to actually get to the place where I'm looking to go, I need to pay attention to systems and frameworks and actually be committed to one of these 37 planners that I got on my on my bookshelf, that I buy a new one every year, but I don't commit. Even if I don't commit to the planner itself, I need to commit to the idea of what it takes. What's my
Mhm.
personal system around being productive? So yeah, man, that's really the Cliff Notes version of how we got here.
But, when I look at that history, that job experience that you have, it really is a richness of experiences that leads you to this point where you're at. Because in development, you are helping to think about mission. You're helping to think about growing capacity. With a pastoral role, you are a leader of that congregation, and you're dealing with all of the craziness that comes from board members and parishioners and leadership roles. You're head on in that, but you're also speaking every single week from the pulpit to people who are listening to you. So I see a lot of those pieces really providing the background that you needed, whether you knew it or not at the time.
Yeah.
It was all coming together to be where you are now.
It's always the insight that comes from retrospect, right?
Mm.
And seeing how I was working on a project with a client not too long ago, and it was very tense. They were having some what they considered to be very tense conversations.
Mm.
And I was just in there, just listening to them, taking notes, reflecting. I would chime up a couple of times as they're going through, because I wasn't really facilitating the conversation. They just asked me to be in the room. And after the conversation, they said to me, "How are you so calm? How are you able to, that was pretty tense. How are you so calm?" And I said, "Well," I made a joke. I said, "Well, I'm a kind of like a churchy kid." And I said, if you've ever seen two church members argue about the color of carpet, you realize what you had today was cute, but
Yeah.
I'm coming from like WWE type background. And it's in many of those experiences in the classroom, teaching all of those years, in, traveling. One of my trips for the NGO, I went to Ethiopia. The trips that we've been on and having to explain campaign, having to galvanize college students to give at least $1 for their university for the campaign that we created. And then the pastoral work of dealing with competing priorities, different personalities, and then having to communicate a message every single week that cuts across generational dynamics and value systems. Mm-hmm. Now, when I'm doing the work that I do in just different places, now, one day I'm with lunch ladies in Baltimore. 2 weeks later, I'm with senior directors in Toronto. And then, a month later, I'm with mechanics in Las Vegas. And it's the blend, the myriad of experiences, and having to communicate with people in different phases of life, going through different challenges now in many ways makes the work that I do a little bit easier to navigate, because I've already done some version of that.
Yeah. I want to talk about the books, Leading While Green, Leading While Scared. Can you summarize those for us real quick?
Yeah. Leading While Green. I wrote Leading While Green because I didn't know what I was doing and I needed help. And I was, and I couldn't pay for anybody's coaching program.
I was going to ask how much of that was, self-biographical.
Oh man, it was all. So Leading While Green, I think the subtitle, How Emerging Leaders Can Ripen into Effective Leaders. Yeah. I wrote that book because I was 30, I think close to 30. Yeah, I was 30. The idea when I started pastoring, I was 30. And I was coming at 2 graduate degrees. I had already had professional experience, but I was going into this world of pastoring where everyone is significantly older than I am, from a parishioner standpoint, from a leadership standpoint. And the thought is, once you get older, you'll be able to have an impact or make a difference or, be really effective. And I was tired of hearing, once you get older. And I was asking questions around, well, what can I do now? What can I do now? And it wasn't just that I was 30. It was also that my tenure, because I didn't originally set out to be a pastor. So if I had, I would have had by 30, maybe 5, 6, 7 years in the industry. So people are not just chronologically looking at my age; they're looking at my tenure in the role and saying you're too young to understand
Yeah.
all of those parts of the conversation. So I said I need to accelerate my growth. I can't afford coaching, can't afford someone's program. I'm looking for a mentor. It's few and far between where I am. How do I accelerate my growth? And I went to Al Gore's internet, because I know today it's Beyonce's internet, but back
Right.
when we were growing up, it was Al
Right.
Gore's
Right.
internet.
Yeah.
I started just emailing people and saying, hey, I'm writing a book on leadership. I'm a new leader. I'm looking to accelerate my growth. Would you be open to a quick phone call or an email exchange?
Yeah.
And I reached out to maybe about 100 people, and I found a handful that sort of took me up on my offer. And my reflection on those notes
Mm.
is what ultimately became Leading While Green. So it was a part of my own growth journey, and how people who are sitting in a seat of responsibility for the first time can become grounded and start to have impact. Leading While Scared was more of a reflection. What do you do once you get to that next level? So Leading While Green was my first pastoral assignment. Leading While Scared was my second one. Because it was significantly different. I went from a context in which I was pastoring and speaking outside of church environments. I was doing trainings and higher education workshops. All these things were emerging together. By the time I get to my second round of what pastoring would look like, now the congregation is significantly different. I went from 3 or 4 small churches with maybe 20 members or so to a church of 300 to 400, to a board of 50 volunteer leaders, to a church revenue of about 2 million. To like all of the leadership context has changed significantly.
Yeah.
And before I was green, now I'm just scared because now the people on my board are ex-military,
Right.
ex-police officers. They're retired from the federal government. They've been around significant leaders and have had influential leadership positions themselves. So now there's an intimidation factor that's happening, and I'm looking to navigate all of these spaces. And I said, well, what did I do last time? Okay. I reached out to people and I got their feedback on how to lead at an early stage. Now, my approach is going to be different for this time around. I'm not necessarily going to reach out to people. No, it'll be more of my personal research, but also now I have the stories from my previous 4 years that now I can leverage. And how do we pivot that? Once you get there, once you sit in that seat of responsibility and you're overwhelmed or you're fearful, how do you take a step forward and do the next right thing?
Yeah. I think, as you were talking, you described one of the big things that I have realized. And I talk all the time about the toxic ideas around productivity that we have ingrained in us. I think the same can be said for leadership.
Yeah.
Because that idea of when you're old enough,
Yeah.
when you're seasoned enough, you can be a leader. And I remember, again, being thrown into that leadership role at Andrews University, not coming prepared to do that, but certainly being there nonetheless. And I did hear that at different times, well, you're not old enough. And I'm thinking to myself, Theo Epstein is 1 year older than me. For those of you who don't know, and I know Pierre knows where I'm going with this, Theo Epstein was the general manager of the Boston Red Sox who brought them back from the curse of the Bambino after 86 years, won the World Series. You knew I was going to get this in here
I knew it
somehow,
was
right?
coming.
Yeah.
I knew it was coming.
I had to bring up the Red Sox or the Patriots or something. But no, Theo Epstein's 1 year older than I am. And here he is leading one of these storied franchises of Major League Baseball and leading them to a World Series, something that had not been done in 86 years as the general manager. It's not about the age.
Yeah.
And when a leader tells you, well, you're not old enough or you're not whatever enough, I think that reflects on them more than it reflects on us.
One of the reasons why I had a difficult time hearing those things is because when I was in grad school, and I shared the whole narrative of graduating in 5 years in a semester versus 4 years. In grad school, doing my master's in communication, and the chair of my department says to me, glad you're here. I accepted you into this graduate program on a probationary status. So I need you to give me 1 semester of just really doing a good job. Make sure your grades are great. We'll lift the probationary status. Everything will be perfect. And she also says to me, as part of this deal, you're going to teach. She's like, I'm not giving you an option. You're going to teach. And you're going to teach the fundamentals course, communication, comm skills 101, hybrid course, introduction to public speaking, introduction to human communication. So I'm 24.
Yeah.
I'm 24 years old. And I'm not a TA. I'm not an assistant.
You're the teacher.
I have a full teaching load at 24 years old. In the first semester of teaching was rough, right? It was rough.
Yeah.
I got beat up, right? It just happens.
I mean, the students are like 6 months younger than you, right?
Exactly.
Or, well, maybe 4 years, 4 years or something. Yeah.
I mean,
because they're intro classes.
And that's why I wore suits
Yeah.
class, because I'm trying to
differentiate.
Right. But her willingness to give me that chance, not only to give me that chance, to put me in a position to succeed, to coach me at 24 years old, to teach, and then to give me, is the other thing that people don't know. Wonderful lady, Delise Stain, the wonderful lady. She gave me a full teaching load, and then she gave me credit. So, and the full teaching load became independent study. So I'm getting course credit for teaching the course, and I'm also getting paid.
Yeah.
It's a great scenario.
But isn't there some irony there of, we let you into the program on a probationary status, but now we're going to give you a full teaching load? I mean, that to me, I'm chuckling when I hear you say that, because there's so much irony there.
And it's so when I get into these different spots, Chris, and they're like, oh, when you get older, you'll be able to, or when you get older, you'll understand.
Yeah.
And how many times do we, I think we like to celebrate prodigies. We like to celebrate the 13-year-old that graduates from high school, the 13-year-old that has their PhD on one side. On the other side, I think as humans, we're intimidated at times when someone comes along and didn't necessarily follow the same progression or track that we did. So we come along and feel like we are duty bound. We are duty bound to be a stopgap measure and help them learn some particular lessons and then hold them. And I had a boss one time tell me, and I'm glad I had this conversation with my therapist already, so I could say this freely. I had a boss tell me one time. He said, "I know everyone on a particular committee is excited about your growth, about your journey, about where you're getting to next. But I'll let you know when it's time for you to progress as a leader." And that was one of the moments in my life where I was thinking, man, this is really tough, and you can really damage people.
Yeah.
When sometimes we project our own internal limitations on their story and on their journey. But as I said, I've had quite a few conversations with my therapist, so I'm in a better place about that one.
So how do you define leadership? How does Pierre Quinn define leadership?
Yeah. Man, this is funny because this is the second time this has come up in a podcast conversation, I think, in probably a week.
I mean, you are the guru.
Okay. So here's how here's how I'm defining this. That's even so funny to hear that. Here's how I'm defining leadership. I define leadership as the ability to get the people that you're connected with, the ability to get them pointed in the right direction and taking the next right action. So it's two parts. Get them pointed in the right direction. That takes motivation, that takes inspiration, that takes a knowledge of and awareness of people's values, what's in it for them, and how does what's in it for them align with what our organization is looking to do. So can we all get pointed in the right direction? But then we have a lot of times where we're aligned as it relates to mission. Like we're all committed to the cause and everybody's high five and fist bump and side hug. And we got t-shirts and we got bumper stickers and, we've changed maybe our background on social media, but we haven't taken any action. We haven't done anything with that motivation or inspiration or that prompt. So leaders don't just galvanize people to head in the right direction. Leaders equip people and see them to the point where they're taking the next right steps or going in the right direction or the next right action toward the thing that we've visioned out. And a lot of times effective leadership is more judged in retrospect than it is judged in real time. When people look back on the time that they spent with you, they measure how far have we come, how much in the right direction have we moved as a result of Chris, being around, as a result of Pierre being around.
Yeah.
What's the difference? And also, what have they left behind? What are the tools and frameworks, the ideas, the systems, the nudges that they've left behind? So if they've retired, transitioned, whatever, we're still moving forward because of how they interacted with us during the time that they were here. So yeah, leadership, let's get everybody pointed in the right direction, and then let's get them taking the next right steps, the next natural steps toward the ultimate reality that we're pointed and looking to face.
Yeah, I love that because it's not about even reaching the goal.
Yeah.
It's taking that next right step, because that oftentimes is the thing that holds us back from achieving the goal, is the lack of clarity around that right next step. And there's a 1,000 ways that I can get here, but what's the one that I need to take today to do that? I love that.
I mean, we talk sports analogies, right? There's how many times have we seen it? I mean, let's maybe pick basketball. I think it's maybe the easier grasp around how I'm looking to frame this. You recognize when a team is young, a basketball team is young. If a basketball team is young, the professional team is really young. In many cases, they need a certain kind of coach. They need a builder coach. That coach is not going to win a championship with that team.
Right.
That coach is going to teach them the fundamentals of the game. It's going to put them in a place where they start to carve out an identity. They're going to develop a player or a set of players' particular skill and nuance to the game. And once they get a particular cadence, and the builder coach knows I'm not winning a championship here. I'm brought in for a specific season of time. Right. Next right action. You go from a builder coach, maybe a young and up and coming coach, to maybe a notable name. And you get a notable name and you start to have perennial success. You start to have playoff success with this coach. And the coach really wants to win a championship, really wants to make it to maybe an NBA finals. And they try really hard, but they reach their limit. And then you bring in either a past winner, or someone with incredible legacy and pull. And it's that coach that pushes them across the line. We saw it in Detroit with Larry Brown. We saw it in Miami with Pat Riley. We saw it in Boston. We saw it
I
in
know how painful
Boston
that was.
with Doc. We saw it in Boston with Doc. And recognize it for my time as a leader. I need to recognize what stage am I in. Am I in builder phase with the organization? Am I in the stabilizing phase with the organization? Am I in the championship phase of the organization? And embracing my role and the tenure of my role and whatever spot that I'm in, and being okay with that. And even celebrating when the person comes after me, when the stabilizing coach comes after me, and I've been a core part of setting the foundation. I see that with like a Mark Jackson in Golden State. Mark Jackson created the culture of Golden State. He was builder coach and stabilizing for a number of years. Steve Kerr's championship coach.
Yeah.
Mark Jackson, I'm sure there's a big part of him that celebrates. I know he wants the championships,
Sure.
but I think he celebrates seeing his players continue really leveraging what he helped them build at that pivotal point in their journey as a team.
But it's something that you went back to that you said earlier about the systems that we leave in place for the next person. That is, I was trying to remember who I heard say this, but they said if you are the only person who knows how to do what you do, you're not a good leader. Because if it's all in your head, you're not bringing other people into the process. You're not helping them to learn from your system to be able to then go out and do after you leave, or to build upon what you've started and take it to that next level. So I think that's powerful.
You know, the world has changed tremendously, and I think for the longest time we felt if you knew my playbook, if you knew my system, then maybe from a business standpoint, you'd be able to take either market share or leverage or popularity away from me. Let's maybe go back 20 years, right? Let's go to the 80s and 90s when we grew up. So much more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Today, though, what do we see all over the internet?
Yeah.
You can have my playbook.
Yeah, here it is.
You can have the 400-page guide that I did step by step how I built my business from zero to a $10 million company. I'll send it to you in exchange for your email and for me to bombard you with emails once a month. But I'll give you my playbook. What has changed? Well, one, we recognize that there is far more value of literally giving away part of your idea, because your idea continues to have longevity.
Yeah.
And even if maybe 5 years later, people don't know where the core idea is, in a lot of ways, it's the attribution is going to get back to you. And from a legacy standpoint, your ideas continue to live on. So that's one. Two, from an entrepreneur standpoint, there's an opportunity to make so much more money from the goodwill gesture of giving away something of incredible value. Even if people never go down the rabbit hole with you and they've made an incredible turnaround based on what you shared with them, their testimonial is like throwing gasoline on the small fire that you've built on making a difference in the wider world. And I think people have gotten much more comfortable with saying, hey, I'll give you the swipe file. I'll give you the Google Drive document. I'll give you everything, because the secret sauce of who you are and conversation with you. And I mean, that's the real key here around even productivity that I learned over time. It's one thing to have a journal. It's one thing to have my planner. It's one thing to have all the Google Docs and templates. Something changes though when I'm being coached through a process. Because it's one thing to have the tools, but if I don't quite know how to use the tools that matches my unique personality, then I'm going to be missing something. So, and I'm the biggest believer of you need to have the right tools and the right coaching, like the right resources and the right relationship in order to really get to the place where we need to go.
So that actually led perfectly into the next part that I wanted to talk about. What are some of the things that your clients are struggling with when they call in Pierre and the Cardell Group?
Yeah.
What are the types of things, and I know it's varied across the board, but what are the types of things that you're helping them work through, that you're coaching them through? They may already have the playbook,
Yeah.
but you're helping them decipher that and put that into action.
Well, for a lot of organizations, because organizations are constantly in flux. We know this from being a part of organizations our entire life.
Yeah.
And dealing with change. I say we got to understand what change is. Change is the thing that happened. So the restructuring, the merger, the renaming, the rebranding of the organization. That's the change. The transition is the internal psychological adjustment that the individual or group of individuals makes in response to the change. And being really clear when we talk about change, what's happening here. So a lot of times when I work with organizations in terms of a level set, many of them have not had a conversation around why the change happened and how our people are adjusting to the change as a result.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take us working together.
Yeah.
We're working together for a couple of weeks. Our boss is gone. We had a 5-minute conversation as a team,
If that,
if
yeah.
that, and it was just we just kept working.
Yeah.
What would have
Back
been
to
the
it.
value of an hour, a lunch, maybe a day? What's the value of, okay, so let's walk through how we're going to restructure our work as a result of this change in our personnel. So we're gonna spend some time talking about how we all feel about it. You've got to grieve a little bit, the whole Kubler-Ross grief cycle, because this is significant when a person that recruited you into an organization is gone. We'll hold some space for that. Then we're gonna reframe how we connect with each other. Then we're gonna set intention around how do we do the work from here on out. Commonly, what happens in orgs is what happened in our org. Well, you get the email or you get the quick note, such and such isn't here. All right, you've been updated. And you're left on your own to sort of get back to it or figure it out. And so one of the biggest things in terms of when I first engage organizations, I say, we're going to talk through. I don't care even how long ago it happened. We're going to talk through your most recent significant change. I had a client on the West Coast, a large tier 1 university. And one of the schools, one of the colleges in this university was going through a significant personnel change when they invited me out to lead their executive leader retreat. And I'm going over the agenda, working with a couple of the topics here. And in the middle of it, I say, here's what we're going to do. Because this person moving from your core team to another part of the university, that's come up 7 times since we started talking this morning. So we're going to stop for an hour. And we're going to talk through the impact of this person leaving the organization. So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about what this person meant to you, how they helped you, and we'll take an hour around that. And then we're going to look at structuring and intention. We had that hour conversation and people were angry. There were questions. There were some tears, all of the things that happen when we process grief. And then we moved on to, in a practical sense, how are we going to do our work as a result of this? We even wrote the person thank you letters. Practically, how are we going to move on and do our work? And the team at the end of the day said, we did not know we needed that conversation, but we were internally holding on to the fact that this significant change happened. The significant change happened. We had not processed it, and we had not thought intentionally around how our work is going to move forward. But we need to ideate. We need to innovate. We need to forecast for the future, but it's very, very difficult to do when we are not taking the time and intentionally breaking down when we get those big gut punches or those potholes.
Yeah.
And eventually, and we know you keep hitting a pothole, and you don't take time to think through how you drive your car and check your tires and your whole system, that eventually the whole car is going to break down. So
Yeah.
a lot of the work that I do, the heaviest lift that I have when I first encounter a team as a consultant or a facilitator, is what's going on right now, and let's walk through that, because all the research, social science research tells you how you feel significantly impacts how you work.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not kumbaya. This is not a silent retreat. This is not we going in the corner and lighting incense and getting in touch with our feelings and all of that. It is practical, actionable, facilitated conversation around how what we experience is impacting our relationships and decision making, and what are the appropriate actions so that we can continue leadership again to point each other in the right direction,
Mm-hmm.
and then take the next right actions as a result. And a lot of my work hangs out there.
Yeah, and again, I think that's so needed in the workplace, because you're right. It's a lot of times in those situations, if it's around personnel, there's the inability to talk about even why we're at this place, or there's the fear that if we talk about the change or the transition that's happened, that questions are going to come up about why are we here. And so I imagine having somebody like yourself come in that doesn't understand the why, wasn't part of that decision making process, was not in the room when it happened, so to speak. Now they can facilitate and lead through that in a way that the leadership might not be able to do, either from an emotional standpoint, or emotional intelligence standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
or from that legal perspective of what they can and can't talk about. And the questions are going to be
Yeah.
completely different when they're coming to you than they are to, say, the big boss or something like that.
I tell people all the time, Chris, like when I'm pitching, right? Because we're all in sales.
Yeah.
When I'm reaching out to organizations, I tell them all the time, some of these conversations we need to have as close to the change as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are onboarding, I do the same thing that everybody does on LinkedIn. I notice somebody has made a change. They're at a different organization. I'm usually going to be in your DM. And I'm going to say, hey, Chris, I see you just started at Wholistic Productivity. I like to talk to you about facilitating transition conversations to maximize the first 30, 60, 90 days with your team. The reason why is that there's a window. There is a window.
Yeah.
So you have a good faith window that people have. Like, Chris is new to Holistic Productivity, so he don't know. We need to give him the benefit of the doubt because he doesn't know. So that's one. The other part is, as an independent, as an outside conversation starter, I can ask the stupid questions.
Yeah, right.
So why do we do that?
Yeah.
Why is that important?
Yeah.
Who was the best boss you ever had? Right? You can ask those questions. And as an independent observer who doesn't know the nuance of the company, I have the latitude and privilege of being able to go places and unearth challenges or opportunities that in many cases would take a leader years to get to, because they're trying to build social capital and rapport.
Yep.
But when you have this independent entity that's willing to partner with you in this way, I encourage people to take advantage of it early in the transition process so that we can equip the leader with the background and insight and perspective that in other cases may take them a couple of years to be able to pick up on and be able to leverage.
Yeah. No, that's great. Talk to me about the global gurus, top 30 leadership professionals. I look at this list. Number 1, John C. Maxwell. Number 2, Simon Sinek. The list just keeps going on. Tell me about that.
So I don't know how the list is curated. I don't know. There's a couple parts to the curation of this list. One is their measurement of the work that you're doing. So I don't know if they're doing deep search on you, whatever. They're compiling the evidence of you actually doing this work. That's one part of it. The other part of it is that people have to vote for you. They have to vote for you. So part of it is you got to do a little bit of campaigning here.
Okay.
You gotta reach out your email list and DMs and all of that and say, hey, I'm being nominated in this space.
Yeah.
If you found some value of our work together, will you vote for me? The thing about that is, it's not one of those things where you click a button and you see one person's name. You click a button and you see everybody. You see John Maxwell. You see Simon Sinek. You see all of these people that the people you reach out to,
Right.
they can click on their names too. And
Right.
I'm sure some people I've sent a DM to that they clicked on John Maxwell and it was like, oh, I was supposed to vote for Pierre. Well, my vote's gone.
Maybe I can't vote twice.
Yeah. So this how it worked was, there was a friend of mine and then someone I interviewed several years ago, because the Global Gurus list has, I think, 12 different categories. So one was customer service and the other friend was communication. And they sent me the DM and I voted for them. And I said, so what's this about? And this, I think, was like 2022. And they say, well, they curate this list of professionals in these various categories. And I said, oh, this is, how do you join? What do you do? And they were like, I don't know. I don't even know how I got nominated. So I looked on the list and I found it. And I said, oh, if a person is not on the list, you can nominate them. Okay. So it was like 2022. I went in, I'm going to nominate myself. What happened? I don't know what happens. And I just didn't hear anything. There was no response to that email. There was nothing. And then 2023, for the 2023 rankings, I got an email that said, we've reviewed your profile. And I'm like, when?
I didn't give you a profile.
I barely gave you an email address.
Right.
Like, when did you review my profile? We reviewed your profile and you're under consideration. So there's two parts. We're going to evaluate your work. And they go through all social media. They do a deep search on the internet, where your name has come up at conferences and presentations and all of this. So they aggregate that. And then a part of it is people have to vote for you. So first year, I was like 30 of 30. 30 of 30. And then it went up a couple notches. I was like 20 something, 2024, and then 2025. I don't even know what the number is.
18. The
yeah,
number's 18.
Yeah. Yep. So that's the story.
But I mean, I remember you saying something, and you've probably said it more than once, and I just really like it. I've thought about it many, many times. It's this idea that people can look at you, at somebody else, and say, man, that's where I want to be. I want to be at that point in my career, in my personal life, in my whatever it is. But they don't see all the steps that took to get you to that point. And even if they had seen all of those steps, they're probably unwilling to do all of the things. I mean, you started off talking about emailing 100 people or DMing 100 people. Hey, can I learn something from you? Who's willing to do that? I mean, it sounds like a very simple step, but the fact is that most of us aren't willing to go and put that work in to be able to get to that point. So yeah, it's, somebody could look at you and say, oh my goodness, Pierre's on the Global Gurus 30 list, but they're not taking into consideration all of the things that have happened in your career up until this point. that have either prepared you for that moment or have been steps that you've intentionally taken to get to that point?
You know, the feeling of being honest about the journey, I think is so critical. Like, let's go back. I mean, we've had podcasts before, right? And
Mm-hmm.
what was it like for you recording those podcasts? I remember the first platform that I was on. I think it was I think it was Blog Talk Radio. Then it was this 1-800 number you had to call in at when the time your show was scheduled, and
Yeah.
then you had to use two phones. And my buddy Theo and we had this show called The Masters because he was working on his master's in social work, and I think I was working on my master's in communication, so we called the show The Masters. And it was this call. It was a lot of setup to try to get, and sometimes the phone would die, and we would have our friends call in and ask questions. And we, had that for a couple of months. But I see how the seeds of that experience 20 years ago, now when I was running the Leading While Green podcast.
Mm.
Well, how did the Leading While Green podcast come about? It came about because I had DM'd all of those people and said, "Hey, I'm starting this leadership journey. Will you contribute to my book?" And after about 5 or 6 conversations, someone said, "Hey, do you have a podcast?" So I had a podcast. I'm starting a podcast for a book that I had not written yet.
Right.
But people are, because I reached out to all of those people. And that's
Yeah.
the hardest part. The hardest part is the rejection.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I would rather you tell me no than to not hear from you.
Mm.
Like, it stings a little. If I
Yeah.
put together this heartfelt email, you take it personally. But in sales, you just can't take it personally. People are busy,
Yeah.
because I think about the number of times people have emailed me, and I didn't ignore them. I just lost the email in the email chain.
Sure. Yeah.
But that willingness to say, I'm going to keep, that's what separates a lot of people. The people that make it a fair amount of time, if we had to put them on a rating system, might not necessarily be who we categorize as the best. And I know best is very subjective.
Right.
In some cases, it's simply the people who are just willing to just stick it out, just stick it out, just stick it out. So we fast forward. I'm having this podcast now, and I don't know if I told you the story, Chris.
Mm.
I started interviewing people. I interviewed one of my coolest interviews. I interviewed Matthew Loon. Matthew Loon was the chief animator at Pixar for a number of years.
Nice.
I interviewed. Did you ever watch Double Dare
Yeah.
as a kid? So
Yeah.
I interviewed Mark Summers
I think I
on
remember
our
that.
podcast. So all of these cool names,
Yeah.
people with significant influence, people with just history behind them. And I remember at one point in my podcast life, or maybe the third podcast iteration, there was a publicist that had found my podcast, and every month they sent me 4 books, and they said, "Hey, skim through these books, and if you want to interview any of these authors,
Hmm.
let us know." But that only comes from those years of, terrible episodes, and that wasn't the best interview, and my pitch wasn't that great, or all of those rejections. Just willing to stick it out, and now building up a pretty sizable leadership network because of that.
Yeah.
And also my biggest regret. I got time. You got time for me to tell you about
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
biggest
Of
regret?
course.
So Dr. Timothy Clark, foundational teaching around psychological safety. That's really, really just exploded since COVID. These conversations
Mm-hmm.
around psychological safety. The publicist during this time, Chris, sent me an advanced copy of Dr. Timothy Clark's book,
Hmm.
4 Stages of Psychological Safety. This is before he blew up.
Yeah.
I let that book sit on my desk for like 4 months before I responded, because they give you, the press release and all of that. If you want to interview this person, send us an email. I let it sit for 4 months and I didn't reach out to him. And he blew up. And I was like,
What?
I have
Hello?
that book. I went to get his book, sent an email, got an email back from his team. Sorry, we are not taking interview requests at this time. Yada, 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 yada. Because at this stage, he's only doing big platforms.
Right.
And I'm just like, man. So even to do the work, and that's another thing about us, like how we frame productivity for us as individuals, all the time, energy, and effort to do the work, you need to be clear on, and part of it too was I didn't really have a system, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
I was just looking at books and responding to emails. And there was not even an Excel spreadsheet around the books that come in. If I had responded to if I had sent an inquiry, if I had the person on the show and the link to that particular podcast episode and all of that for documentation purposes, there was no system.
Yeah.
So I thought just doing the thing was enough. And I missed out on that incredible opportunity. Like, I can't even get Dr. Timothy Clark to respond to an email when I had him at that perfect point in time, because I didn't really have a system of accountability around what I was doing. So we can do a lot of great work and build up a lot of momentum, but if we don't have some foundational things in place, we'll consistently miss out on some really, really cool opportunities.
Two things that you said there that I think are so important is the consistency of just doing it, even though you're getting the rejection, even though, there's nobody listening. You feel like you're screaming into the wind, whatever that analogy is. I remember, you talking about Blog Talk Radio. That was my first podcast as well. And we used to joke about tens of listeners, right?
Yeah, I remember. I was listening.
I know you were one of the 10, right? But we kept doing it. And I think that's the part that we have to get comfortable with, is the consistency of going through. And then the second part is, you mentioned systems, and I love that, you identify that we need that system. But I also find that, and sometimes with myself as well, we can build too much of the system without actually doing the work of interviewing and getting the podcast. Like, I can spend a month building the systems, building all of the foundational things that go underneath that. But that's not what really matters. It's getting out there and doing the thing, the podcast, the planner, the whatever it is that you're trying to put out in the world. Without doing that, whether you're green, whether you're scared, right? If you're not doing it because of those things, or because you're focusing too much on the system, we miss out on the thing that really matters. So it's that balance of finding that balance between just going and doing the thing with no system and having too much system, and finding that sweet spot, I think, is where it's really important.
And one of the things that I learned from you when I was first crafting fundraising letters, and we would go back and forth over the letter. And I remember one time you said to me, you're like, Pierre, eventually you just got to send it. You could tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak, but eventually, like, you just got to send the thing.
Yeah.
And pivot, learn from the mistakes, do better next time. Yep. But you can't have that letter in the holding pattern forever, because how this annual giving goal connects to the wider fundraising goal of the university. What's the trickle down effect? We're bringing people into our pipeline that eventually are going to be significant givers to the university. It has wide reaching implications. And because of that, like, what value is that letter in your inbox, or just stuck in the stage of whatever the portal that you're using? But you just got to get it out there. Yeah. And I held on to that for a very, very long time. Like, eventually you just got to get it out there.
Yeah.
And it is much better to get it out there and have something that you can look at and make adjustments in response to than to have a seemingly perfect idea in your head that doesn't bring you or people around you any benefit at all.
Yep. And that's where we learn from seeing what doesn't work. If it's in our head, it's perfect. But, right? When we get it out there and actually see what the reaction is, that's where we learn and can make it better in the future.
When I first started trying to hold professional speaker thing and just sending out emails to student success directors at various colleges and universities. And I remember sending an email and someone emailed me back and they said, if this is the type of email that you're sending out, you're probably not going to get much business.
Mm.
It was such a gut punch. I know you've never received a response to anything like that in your life.
Oh, yeah, no. Definitely.
Such a gut punch. But it's a data point too.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, so let me go back and analyze, what did I write here? And how can I learn? This embarrassing gut punch moment, really tough to hear, but I needed to hear it. How can I learn from it and make the adjustment? And my letters got better over time, and we've had some pretty good success along the way.
Yeah. No, I have gotten those letters. In fact, the one that I got was working at a school doing fundraising, sending out letters to raise money for the school. And they said, this is not the type of letter that should be representing an institution of learning. They said, you have English teachers there. Maybe they should look over your letter, make sure you got the right grammar.
Wow.
But you know what? Again, you take that data point and it stings a little bit, but you move on and you say, okay, I'm going to put my pride aside. And now we're going to make sure that we have somebody who's looking at this from a grammar perspective and not just all the fundraising fundamentals are checked off, right?
Yep.
And I actually started working with an editor who has taught me so much about editing and writing because of her work as an editor. And she would get very heavy with the red pen, right? But she would also explain, this is why I'm saying this, and this is why I'm scratching through this or correcting this. And that was huge for me to be able to learn and grow. So some of those moments, they're not fun, but they are necessary.
Absolutely.
They are necessary. Pierre, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you for your time. I want to end every guest that I have, and you're the first. So again, we're throwing this out into the world. We're going to see how it takes. But I was inspired by something I saw years ago. James Lipton was host of Inside the Actors Studio. I think you mentioned that you saw it a couple times, but he always ended every show with 10 questions. These are the Proust questionnaire. Okay. And it's sort of a confessional that was done years ago. There's been several iterations, but again, I took this from James Lipton, Inside the Actors Studio. So I'm going to ask you 10 questions. You can go as deep with these as you want. You don't have to go deep at all. Some of them are just going to be simple answers, but this is how I want to end every episode. So question number 1, what motivates you?
I get really excited when I see people close to me succeed, when I see them pursuing their passion or their interest. I have a couple of close friends, and this goes all the way back to college days. When one person would do something well, we would make it into a bit of a friendly competition. One person would give a presentation, or they would get a job on campus, or they would have some incredible opportunity, and we would say to each other, oh, okay, just wait and see what I'm going to do next week. So when people who are close to me, when I see them succeeding and pursuing the thing that they're just uniquely designed to do, that motivates me to show them what I'm getting ready to do next week.
What discourages you?
Staying in my own head. Very dangerous place sometimes. And if I'm in my own head too much and not having, especially conversations like these, it can be very discouraging.
One word that describes you at your best.
Flow.
One word that describes you at your worst.
Withdrawn.
Other than family or work, what gives you purpose?
When you get those emails or phone calls, DMs, or even quick conversations after a piece of work or a body of work where a person says, this is really what I needed to hear today. This was really helpful for me.
What guilty pleasure brings you joy?
Ooh. Chris, don't tell anybody, but I have no problem getting to the airport early, grabbing an overpriced bag of trail mix, a diet whatever, and sitting in the corner and people watching and making up stories around where I think they're headed.
I won't tell a soul. How do you celebrate a win?
Probably a new pair of sneakers, Jordan 1s or some Converse Chuck Taylors.
How do you bounce back after a loss?
I give myself some time, maybe a day or so, maybe an hour to be upset about it. And then I go into a battle plan of what I'm going to do next time.
Who is the last person you expressed gratitude towards?
This is connected to a loss. I got a notification this week that I was not accepted into a doctoral program. I gave myself about an hour to be sad about it. And then create a piece of content, LinkedIn post. And in that LinkedIn post, I thanked the 3 people who wrote recommendation letters for that doctoral application. Now I'm thinking about it. I was like, wait, maybe I should have reviewed those letters before. But no, I was really grateful grateful to them for just their time and their encouragement and conversation about the doctoral journey, and then the willingness to recommend me for this program. And I'm going to hit them up for recommendation for the next program I apply to as well.
Consistency. If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 25-year-old self?
Document. I know you're really committed to the destination, but the notes about the journey are going to be some of the sweetest parts of it.
Pierre Quinn, thank you so much. Loved having you on the show. Love you, man. And I just appreciate all that you have poured into me and so many others. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here. I will have links to all of Pierre's books and to the Cardell Group. If you want to talk with him further, you can find out all of his social stuff on my website, holisticproductivitypodcast.com. You can find it there. And again, thank you so much for being here. Pierre, thank you as always. We love having you on the show.
Chris, I'll share with you what my grandfather used to share with me and his grandkids. I don't care what other people say about you. You're all right with me.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Once again, the goal of this podcast and the show is to dream big, plan smart, and live fully. Thank you so much for being here. Come back for the next episode of the Holistic Productivity Podcast on Tuesday. And again, you can follow us on social media. We are on all of the socials. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Threads. We're everywhere at Holistic Productivity. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you to Pierre Quinn, and we will see you next time. Take care.